Hey Wargamers, today I have another army list review. If you haven't seen one of these videos before, I basically take army lists submitted to me by patrons over on Patreon and look at their original list, talk about its strengths, its weaknesses, and then provide a revised list for that patron. So if this is something that you want me to do for you, head on over to Patreon and you can join our community there. But let's get into this one. So this is from a relatively new patron, and he's a guy that is trying to get more into the tournament scene, it seems like, and his army list is basically a response to an earlier experience he had at a tournament where he felt like his list was really too anti-infantry focused and is looking to make it a little bit more anti-armor focused in this new iteration. It's comprised of two different detachments. It has a Tau battalion detachment and a Vior Law outrider detachment. And so let's start with the battalion detachment. It has a Cadre Fireblade, and I should mention, of course, that this is a 1,500 point list. So it's a Cadre Fireblade with the standard loadout along with a marker drone. So he has one marker drone there. Something I'll say right off the bat here is this one marker drone seems a little bit like a liability when we bring just a single drone attached to a lot of different units. That makes the opponent have a lot more opportunity for kill points. And so I'm going to seek to condense the number of drones down into units of tactical drones. That gives us a couple advantages. One is that we avoid that kill point issue, but we also gain the benefit of being able to deep strike those drones where they need to be later in the game. So that's something to keep in mind right off the bat. And then because we're playing Tau, we got to bring some of those juicy characters. So we're bringing Long Strike. He has an ion cannon, a couple seeker missiles, and smart missile systems. I think that's a really good loadout for Long Strike. One thing that concerns me about him, though, is that he's the warlord in this list. And the thing about Long Strike is even though he's a character, he has enough wounds that he can be targeted independently. And he doesn't have really a great way to avoid being just blown off the board right away. So I would prefer not to have Long Strike be the warlord. Instead, I'd like this Cadre Fireblade to be my warlord just because he's easier to hide. Yes, Long Strike having his warlord trait can make him a little bit more survivable depending on the circumstances, but overall, I think you gain more by just having the Fireblade be your warlord. Okay, so moving on to troops, we have a unit of 9 fire warriors and then 2 gun drones. This is something that can be nice, having the gun drones in with the infantry, just because they can benefit from things like the volley fire rule. But overall, I am a little shy of gun drones now just because they are so expensive. I think I'd rather have more points than fire warriors in this context. Another unit of fire warriors, this is 6 men strong, and this one has shield drones. Similar comment to what we had with that marker drone. Shield drones are in my opinion, the best tactical drone at this point, and so I like having shield drones on the table, especially to help out with some of these battle suits that we're going to get to in a moment. But having 2 of them leaves us open to a kill point issue, and I'm going to try to condense that down into a smaller number of tactical drone units. And then the final unit of fire warriors is 6 strong again, and this one has 2 gun drones. Just see previous comments, I suppose. Moving on to the elite section, we have a unit of 3 stealth suits. This has 2 shield drones. Again, I'm going to try to condense this down. And then we have 2 burst cannon Shazui, and then Fusion Blaster Shazui. So one thing here is that we want to make sure that one of these guys is a Shazray. We want to have our increased leadership as well as our extra punch from our sergeant character. So we want to make sure that gets into the army list and is codified there. And then the Fusion Blaster is kind of a good and bad thing, right? So this is in response to an experience where we didn't have enough anti-armor. So the intuition or the instinct is to put the Fusion Blaster in the stealth suits. And I think that that's not a terrible thing. However, this stealth suit unit is unique amongst the list. It's going to be out by itself, and it's going to kind of have a hard time, I think, deploying that fusion blaster in an effective way. It's only one fusion blaster, and you're sinking a fair number of points into it. So overall, I think that this stealth suit unit has kind of an undefined role. I mean, there are certainly benefits to having stealth suits, particularly if you're bringing things that are deep striking, or if you're worried about things that are going to deploy close to you. They're a good buffering unit that can help keep your opponent at bay during deployment in your early phase. But I don't see a great application for this particular unit given the rest of the army list. And then in heavy support, we have a Hammerhead gunship. This has a railgun, 2 smart missile systems, and 2 seeker missiles. Smart missile systems are really good on long strike as he gets his +1 to wound. But on normal hammerheads, they're they hit or miss. There are some benefits, but in general, I like gun drones a little bit more, but seeker missiles are fine too. The railgun, I think, is a little bit more problematic. If we look at the numbers on railguns versus ion cannons are just your better bet. I have a video on this that I will link to in the description below about why ion cannons are a more efficient choice than a railgun. But of course, seeker missiles, especially if you're bringing long strike with you, great choice. Love seeing seeker missiles on hammerheads when long strike is on the board. And if you're bringing hammerheads, long strike should always be on the board. At least turn 1, right? Moving on to the next detachment. Like I said, this is a Vior Law Outrider detachment. And it starts off with a commander and a Cold Star. He has a flamer that's amped up to the thermoneutronic projector. I love this signature system. And this is probably the reason why this is a Vior Law detachment as opposed to anything else. But overall, it's not it's an essential component of having the Cold Star. I like it. I love playing with it. But you could also go with another fusion blaster or a supernova launcher. Either of those are going to be good options too. It has 2 fusion blasters on here in addition to that, and then a missile pod. The missile pod is really clunky here because it doesn't fit with the deployment strategy or overall tactics that are really going to be used by this Cold Star. It does give it a nice ability to poke at distant targets, but it's only 1 missile pod. It's not going to make that big of a difference, I would say, in most cases. And so really, I'd rather see there be another fusion blaster on this suit. So at least 3 fusion blasters on your Cold Star, I think, is a pretty standard loadout, and for good reason. There's also 2 shield drones here. This one is a situation where I can see bringing shield drones, especially if you are going to deep strike him. Although if you're going to deep strike him, I would go with an enforcer in most cases. But giving him shield drones is fine. It allows you to let him have a little bit more protection early on, especially if you're going to deploy him in a flank or something like that. But if I'm going to be condensing drones anyway, I might just scoop those into a different tactical unit. For the elites, we have a Riptide, 2 fusion blasters, advanced targeting, target lock, and then an ion accelerator. The support systems here are my go-to, so I think that's awesome. But the fusion blaster and ion accelerator, I think, are inefficient choices just because a lot of the work that an ion accelerator would do, the heavy burst cannon is going to do better, or at least have a little bit more flexibility and just be a more well-rounded choice. And then fusion blasters just are too short of range for your Riptide. You want to make sure that he uses that range that he has to full effect. And so I really like smart missile systems on these guys. And with the -1 from the advanced targeting, that really works out nicely. And that's another thing, I guess, here too. Both the fusion blaster and the ion accelerator, they don't really need the advanced targeting system. And so if you were to go with that, I would maybe consider a different support system like Velocity Tracker, perhaps. But yeah, I would switch this guy to heavy burst cannon and smart missile systems as opposed to ion accelerator and fusion blaster. It gives you the ability to take out armored units, which is a concern here, but still is a really good generalist weapon too. And then finally, we have 2 units of Pathfinders. The first unit has 5 Pathfinders. Again, we want to make sure that that sergeant character is explicit. But we have a shield drone and a gun drone. Kind of the same. I'm not going to go over this again, but kind of the same thing that we had before. And the same thing with the other Pathfinder unit. So overall, I think these units can be tweaked a little bit. But in general, Pathfinders are a risky choice just because they are really easy to kill. And for that reason, I would prefer to see things like Cadre Fireblades or Firesight Marksman as my marker light sources if we're trying to be more resistant to the enemy shooting. So Fireblades and Marksmen are characters, so they're harder to kill. They have really good output because they have higher ballistic skill. So that's kind of how I would go with this. And then a Piranha with a Fusion Blaster and a couple Seeker Missiles. This is a lot of points for something that's probably not going to do a whole lot. Piranhas do have their uses, especially if you want to slow down an approaching enemy. They can be really good as meat shields, basically. But I don't see the Piranha pulling its weight in this list just because of its ballistic skill and vulnerability as a vehicle. So I would prefer to see some of those points redistributed to bulk up our other units and see more of the offensive capability there. Okay, so let's take a look at the revised list. All right, here is the revised list. Instead of having 2 different seps, I've taken everything and put it into TauSept. The reason for that is because with TauSept in particular, we want to be able to leverage the focus fire stratagem and be able to get the most bang for our buck there and get as many shots on target as possible. And so if we split our army between Tau and Vior Law, we're not going to be able to do that. And additionally, it just allows better synergy between units. So for that reason, I've put both things in Tau. That does mean that we have to give up the Flamer, which I love, but it does mean we have to give up the Flamer. But I think having a Supernova launcher on your Cold Star Commander that's TauSept is going to work out pretty darn well in general. Plus, you get the added range of the Supernova launcher and everything like that. So I think it will work out pretty well, if not, I think it will work out better. Is why I did it. So, all right, let's get into the details here. So here we have a battalion detachment again. It's TauSept, led by that same Cadre Fireblade. However, this time he's our warlord. He has through Unity Devastation, as well as a Pure Tide Engram Neurochip. I think this is a really useful signature system to have. It makes things a lot easier, and we're actually going to be spending another command point to bring that Supernova launcher. Not necessary to do, but if I'm going to be saving the points by not investing in a Fusion Blaster on that Cold Star, I'm going to want to actually bump that AFP up to Supernova launcher and make it worthwhile. So, by bringing the Pure Tide Engram Neurochip, we're able to recoup our command points, if not steal them from the opponent as well. So, that's pretty darn good. And the reason why he's our warlord again is to make sure that he doesn't die from just normal shooting. You have to work to be able to kill a Fireblade or have sniper weapons, which are not very common. So Long Strike still here, still has Seeker Missile, still has Smart Missile Systems, still has an Ion Cannon, and I think that's a great loadout. We have our 3 strike teams again. This time we have just strike teams. There are no drones in these units. I have a unit of 6, I have a unit of 8, and I have another unit of 8. So that gives us quite a bit of Fire Warrior shooting that can benefit from the Cadre Fireblade, as well, again, as our Focus Fire Stratagem. In Fast Attack, I have 3 units of 4 shield drones each. This is what I've done with all those drones, is I've compact them into these nice little units, and that means that they can deploy as individual units where we want them, right? One of the things, too, about having your drones attached to different units is that they have to deploy with those units, and that means that they're not necessarily going to be where they need to be that first turn, right? A lot of times my Fire Warriors are not necessarily next to my Riptide. even though I'd want the drones that are on the Fire Warrior team to benefit the Riptide. That won't work with my deployment. So by putting them into these units here, I get to put them right where I need them. And sometimes that's going to be in reserve, and sometimes that's going to be putting them in deep strike on turn 2 or whatever. Sometimes even turn 1 if we're worried about that. So we have 3 units of shield drones here, and then we have a second Hammerhead with ion cannon, smart missile system, and seeker missiles. All right, and this is where we see some more significant changes. Again, I moved this away from a Vior-La detachment into a Tau Sept detachment. And instead of being an Outrider detachment, it's now Vanguard. This gives us the overall same number of CP, although I spend one of those to get the Supernova launcher like I talked about. And I think it maintains the overall approach and feel of the original army list well, maybe pushing it to be a little bit more optimized, at least in my opinion. If you guys disagree, please let me know in the comments below what you think would be better or worse in this scenario. But okay, so here's our Vanguard detachment. We have that same Cold Star. He has 3 fusion blasters this time, not bringing that missile pod, and instead bringing the Flamer, I have the Supernova launcher, which does a lot of the same things for 1 point cheaper. In elites, I have 3 Firesight marksmen. These are going to be my marker light sources for the most part, as opposed to relying on those Pathfinders that can be picked off fairly easily. And then I have 2 Riptides. This is where the bulk of our mid to high range firepower is going to come from, in addition to the Hammerheads. And they are equipped identically. We have 2 smart missile systems, a heavy burst cannon, advanced targeting system, and target lock on each of those. And that's the list. So we have a nice block of infantry, a nice block of Riptides, and then we have a pair of Hammerheads as well. And this gives us a nice distribution of firepower across the board that's going to do well against a lot of different opponents. Things where this might struggle a little bit more is if there's massive amounts of infantry. We might run into some problems there, but again, Riptides are going to do pretty darn well there. We're getting 8 shots from smart missile systems, and at -1, that does a lot of damage for infantry blobs. So, we're in a pretty good position against a lot of things. Things that might be a little bit harder to kill with this are things like knights, but using the focus fire stratagem gives us a huge leg up. If we land 1 wound on a knight, we can be killing it easily with Riptides, easily with even Fire Warriors. So it's not that hard to take out a knight with this list. I think you have a lot of the tools here that you need. It's just a matter of deploying the army in a strategic way and utilizing the stratagems at the key points. So overall, I think this is maintaining a lot of the same feel of that original list while tweaking it up a little bit. And yeah, I think it's a good spot. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. What do you like? What don't you like about this list? And of course, thanks for watching and happy wargaming.
Hey everyone, this video was made possible by my supporters over on Patreon. If you also enjoyed this video, consider joining our community over there. Special thanks to Max Harrison, NoExcusesPanda, Nick Steele, TauOswell, Paul Lueders, Jared Egeler, Brian Mann, Jake Johnson, Eric Jackson, Youhei Penguin, Peter Benjamin Parker, RP, Christian Gustafson, Andy M. Young, Julian Peck, Giovanni DiMaggio, and Christopher Sorrell.